How was that? Hi. Good to see you guys. Thank you all for coming, and welcome to our panel about nerdy-ass D&D discussion. So. I'm going to take a seat for a second, and then I'll probably sit at the front of the table, because this seems a little formal to me. But yeah, so welcome everyone. If you don't know who I am, my name is Matthew Mercer. I'm a voice actor from Los Angeles, California, and I'm a huge nerd. So I've been playing D&D and other RPGs most of my life, both video game and tabletop, and in recent years have had something weird in my life happen where a lot of other people have gotten invested in my D&D game. Almost as much as I am, and it's kind of incredible. But yeah, so I have a show called Critical Role, which me and a bunch of other nerdy-ass voice actors that are friends of mine began playing at home privately years ago, and we were asked to stream it on Twitch, now coming up on our 3rd-year anniversary, which is crazy. And oh yeah, we're not going anywhere. I mean, cameras or not, we're still playing. So, but for now, everything's pretty kosher. So yeah, we started streaming it, and we were very scared to stream it because, of course, when you put anything you love on the internet, it's a dangerous and scary thing, especially tabletop gaming, which had been a largely misunderstood genre and hobby for a long time, and the idea of doing it so people can just watch it seemed like folly. I was like, no, this is just opening us up to everyone telling us how terrible we are and go away. Thankfully, I was very wrong for the most part. There's still that, and I expect that. That's fine. But we've found this incredible community of people that not just watch our adventures and are invested in our adventures and do stories and art, and but go off and create their own, which is what I really wanted to do, was use it as a platform to empower other people to create their own adventures, to find a new hobby they didn't know was out there or didn't understand how to get into, or rediscover it because it had been a long time since they gave themselves permission as an adult to get back into it, and in doing so find incredible friends groups and reconnect and find what, in my opinion, is one of the best uses of your social time with a close group of friends. There's really no experience like playing a tabletop RPG, in my opinion. So it's been really amazing, and I feel like a proud papa seeing all these people out there who have either gotten into D&D through our show or other streaming services, or got back into it, and they tell me about their adventures and their characters, sometimes for a while. But that's cool, because that was me for a long time. So I'd be like, you played D&D? I'm like, oh yeah, let me tell you about my dwarf fighter. So, and then they just slowly turn to ash, as a thing. But yeah, it's been incredible. And just these recent years, seeing what this panel's about, the kind of tabletop renaissance that a lot of people are talking about, is seeing what was once a hobby that had difficulty being understood, being respected in a lot of spaces for many years, had suffered through the satanic panic of the 80s. And recently, thanks to things like Stranger Things, thanks to Twitch and live play productions that have been going for years, even before we started ours, now into other forms of media, it's not just being proud to say that you play Dungeons & Dragons, but more and more people are asking, I've always wanted to get into that. Do you know anybody, or do you know how I can learn? And we have great people like Matt Colville who are doing YouTube channels about how easy it is. Colville! How easy it can be to run a game, and all the aspects of it that I was very scared of as I got older and trying to dive into it. It's a great time to learn and a great time to dive into it. So it's super exciting. I'm super excited. We had a very emotional end of our last campaign in October, a game that we ran for 5 years. The characters that we, in many cases, lived and breathed. To the point where, and you guys didn't see this, but before we went live last Thursday, Travis turned to Taliesin across the table and went, Percy, and we all slowly turned to Travis and said, did you just call him Percy? And that's when we realized it's probably best that we ended the last campaign. We're starting to blur that line a little intensely. And we no end of shit going forward for that. But yeah, so we ended that campaign. It was very emotional. And then for the past few months, have been a lot of preparation for the new campaign, which we just started, this last week. Which was a very nerve-wracking experience to build for. Are you? See, now that's some devil magic right there. We have officially, what I've seen in person, the first full cosplay of one of our characters 2 days after. Jester, stand up and take a bow. What's your name? Ariana. Amazing job. That's awesome. Oh my God. Oh yeah, no, I'm actually, come back on, take a picture and send it to her. Just because watching Laura freak out is amazing. As you've seen, she's so much fun to mess with. Yeah. Go ahead and take a pose for me. Yay! Okay, you. You're amazing. That's so cool. So stuff like this happens now, which is crazy. And to put it into context, like we were already pretty nervous going in because when we started streaming originally, they were characters that we had already been with for a few years privately, so everyone was very sure of themselves and their personalities and their story arcs, and we just kind of opened up to the world. This was a new campaign for everyone, and we keep this in mind too. While we've been playing this for a number of years, for a lot of our party, it was their second campaign ever. Because the first arc, the Vox Machina, was their first experience playing a role-playing game. So they were super nervous about it. Except for like Liam and Taliesin and me and Marisha, everyone first. I'll switch over to this one. So we're sitting down at the table and we're getting ready to go live, and everyone's kind of getting jittery and they're nervous and going, "Oh my God, I hope it's okay." Travis goes and checks the numbers 2 minutes before we go live, and he's like, "There's like 70,000 people on Twitch." And we're like, "What?" And he goes, "I think it's broken." Reloads it. Oh, now it's 80. And all of us just turn pale. And I'm curious to go back and watch our faces on the VOD and just see how all of us are just. Hi. And then throughout, I think the total numbers came in between the platforms. We were streaming to Twitch, we were streaming to YouTube Live and Alpha. And I think between them all, we hit around 125,000 people watching live. Watching us play Dungeons and Dragons. And that, as many of you out there who grew up in the same era I did, back when this thing was very kind of a taboo and misunderstood thing, that's crazy! That's nuts! So, it's just magical. It's perpetually magical. We're so appreciative of all of you. We don't know what's happening. We have no idea. We're just holding on by the seat of our pants and hoping we don't mess it up. So thank you guys for being so supportive. Thank you guys for being so awesome and as excited as we are. And then taking this example of what we're hoping to be an example of just, goodwill and sharing it with everyone else and being a continuation and an extension of that. Seriously, it's really, really appreciated. So give yourselves a round of applause for that. So yeah, it's been a huge part of my life. I owe a lot of who I am as a person. I owe a lot of my career and my skills socially to growing up playing these role-playing games. It's a space where you can therapeutically work through, issues in your life through a character that's other than you. It's a place where you can find empathy for personalities and people in different walks of life and different situations than those you're in. It's a place to express frustration and anger in a safe area sometimes against monsters and terrors and great evil bad beings that can be a representation of the things in life that have you hurting. And so it becomes a really great place for you to learn empathy, to learn expression, to learn to be open and be sometimes sensitive with friends through the comforting veil of another character. and it's allowed me to learn a lot about myself, how to be a friend, and it's led to many of my standing friendships throughout my whole life. So I owe a lot to role-playing games, D&D specifically. So that being the case, and having the chance to do panels like this and come out and meet guys like you and hear your stories that's nutrition to me. It keeps me alive. It really excites me. Marisha can say, like, it's exhausting in a weird way how overwhelming the positivity is, and it's absolutely wonderful. And it's so much bigger than us. Like, we're a show, we're a group, we're a game group of friends, but the community, the critters, what you guys put out there eclipses anything and everything we do. Even if we may be the core of that community, you guys continue to be what makes all this worth it and more. And for this, not trying to get too emotional on this, but like it's a lot of reflection, especially with last week's first campaign session. I'm still continuously figuring out how we got put into this space, and I don't want it to ever end. So anyway, that being said, this is a conversation. And I've talked a lot at you for the beginning of this panel. So I'd love to talk with you and have questions to ask, ideas and stuff. We have a microphone here at the front. If you have something you want to discuss, bring it up to the front here and get in line. Try and keep it somewhat concise and not too many layered questions, because I want to try and talk with as many of you as possible. And we probably won't be able to get through everybody, but I'm going to try. And please move at a respectable speed. Don't worry. Alrighty. My flight left at 8 a.m. Friday morning. So I had to wake up at 5 a.m. And after the nerves and the jitters of that first campaign on Thursday, I didn't get to sleep till about 3 a.m. So I got about 2 hours of sleep, woke up, went to the airport, got like another hour and a half on the plane. Because, plane. And then went right to my signing yesterday. So I've seemed a little frazzled over the past 24 hours. I apologize, but there's a good reason. Yeah, fair enough. All right, so, sir, hi.
Hello again.
Hello again. What's your question?
We had several conversations when I could get a hold of you about the campaigns that I'm currently in, that I was considering starting to stream them or record them or novelize them or something. Because I didn't really get that idea until after the first campaign. Until after the first session, which is basically session 0, where they had like who everyone is, where is in meet in the tavern, that sort of thing. Are you still able to start something akin to Critical Role, where you record the games even if you miss the very first session, and because the first session has all the backstory stuff so far?
Yeah, most stories, whether it be film, television, novel, the first chapter isn't you learning everything about the characters. There's a lot of elements of their life that's already happened.
Oh, okay.
And part of, for the reader, what's interesting is to kind of fill those gaps. Like for the new campaign, I did a session 0 with all the players before we started streaming it. There was kind of like a prelude that was both a space for them to feel comfortable, and like this is a little private thing that they just have for themselves to kind of figure out the character. And that way when we come into the session for that first episode, you already feel like it's a lived-in world, as opposed to everyone kind of awkwardly going, "Hi, I'm a tiefling." There was a little bit of that too, but that happens with any, beginning of a campaign. So don't feel like you have to front load all the exposition or all the information, all the backstories up front. If anything, it makes the world feel more like you're getting a glimpse at a living space. If people continue to act and be without all the information available to you. Like it's already happened and it's still happening. So don't feel like that should be constraining you.
And also, aside from D&D, which is the D20 system, do you have any other systems you like in terms of tabletop games, and why?
Okay. This is a whole long discussion, and I'm trying to keep it concise. We can get to the next question. The Fate system I've enjoyed a lot of times. I've played Traveler and Diaspora, which are both fun games, both like hard sci-fi and weird sci-fi. And those have, especially Traveler, because it's one of the few games where you can die in character creation. because you get to choose like your character's path in life and like what jobs they do, and if they go into more dangerous jobs, they learn better skills they start with. But there's a chance that if you have a dangerous job, you'll get killed on the job and have to start over. It's kind of fun. The old school Deadlands system, which is phenomenal. It's a little more complicated. It's not as streamlined as the newer one, but the idea that casting spells is you basically playing a card game with devils and demons. And the better hands you get against the DM or the GM of the game who's playing the devil side gives you different abilities based on the spell you want to do. That's how it's got a lot of really cool like old Western elements. There's also I played the Amber diceless role-playing game when I was in high school based off the Amber series, and that was interesting, but that takes a lot of trust because without dice, it's a lot of just you all deciding together what succeeds and what fails, and that can lead to arguments. I learned very quickly if everyone isn't on the same page and trusts each other at the table. Those are a few examples of what I've enjoyed. I've heard good things about the newer Star Wars systems. Haven't tried that yet. Yeah, anyway, I should get to the next question. But thank you, man.
Real quick, guys, keep it to one question only. If you have a second question, go to the end of the line and then ask your second after.
Hello.
Hello. Oh gosh, that was loud.
That's good.
So I just wanted to say that I really look up to you and your storytelling. Your descriptions and stuff is amazing. And I wanted to know, like, I'm sorry if this has been asked before, but do you have any like tips or advice for like anyone, writers or GMs, storytellers, in how you come up with such great like descriptions and such vivid images of things that are all in your head?
Well, for one, reading a lot. It helps expand your vocabulary. There's a lot of words that'll come across in books, be like, I don't know what that means. And you look it up, and you're like, that's cool. And now I know that word and I can use it. That was huge for me growing up and continues to be whenever I have time to read. A cool way to just keep that sharp and moving forward. Also consider when you're setting a scene, it's not just visuals. Consider all the senses. Consider ways that you can set a scene with both what they're seeing, what the temperature of the room is, if there's a certain like an acrid or iron-like taste in the air, or if it's very cold and causes their teeth to feel pain when they breathe in. Is it, is there a specific sound of distant, shaking, or perhaps water dripping off of wall condensation? Think of how the different senses are affected when you set a scene, and that helps immerse your players or whoever's reading your story as you get into it. Yeah, I mean, that's a big topic, but from running a game standpoint, at least, I find those are good little tricks whenever you open a new sequence, a new location for the players to immediately pull them into the world and help them imagine exactly where they are. And that just helps with immersion. It helps the players get ready to go ahead and dive into it in character. That's a really, really quick tip that I hope will be helpful.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
How's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Good. So, the new campaign, when your players start talking to you about the new characters.
Yes. Which, by the way, I do want to try and avoid spoilers in
Yes.
case people haven't seen the new episode.
And they came to you with their ideas. Did any of them come to you with an idea that made you go, ooh, no?
Generally, no. Oh, not my players. I've had that happen in the past. But I prefer, if a player wants to play a character of a certain kind, I'm not going to tell them not to. I might help them finesse if it's either, or let them know in some situations where it's going to be difficult based on the world we're playing in, or they don't understand kind of, issues that might come up. Like, for instance, if somebody was like, I have a charisma of 8, I want to be a warlock. I'd be like, ooh. Well, maybe let's try and mix up those stats a little. But there are certain concepts that may not be the strongest concept. In fact, we have a few race and class combinations in the new campaign that are by no means optimal when you consider min-maxing a character's strengths. But that's also cool because you get combinations you wouldn't expect. And to me, it's more important to create a character idea than it is to create something that's optimally powerful. If you can do both, that's your game. That's fun too. But I don't think that should hinder you necessarily. So yeah, there's never been a concept that I shot down. I can help players finesse it if they're unsure or if they're trying to feel out how this would fit in the world, and I'll work with them and we'll talk over their story and talk about their abilities and how that might fit for their narrative down the road. But it's rare that I shoot something down unless the person is a real dick. It's like, my concept is a person that sets children on fire. I'm like, I don't know if that's going to play well with the rest of the group, buddy.
Last one session.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, Mercer.
Hi.
I have a question. What do you think was the worst decision that Vox Machina has ever did? personally.
That's a lot of precision. Let's see. As a member of Vox Machina. Vox Machina as a whole?
Yes.
Oh, man. To be perfectly honest, not checking for traps at the Tomb of the Raven Queen.
Yeah.
Because that led to a chain of events that led to a very sad story.
I was rewatching that like the other night too. It was really bad.
Yeah, but it made for a great narrative. Not all things have to be positive, and there are a lot of things to gain. And yeah, I mean, there's always an urge as a GM to be like, I want this to end out okay. I want there to be, I want it to be all right. And a lot of times that's a good thing. But some stories are powerful because it doesn't work out in the most positive light. That's realistic, and sometimes it's a very healing experience to go through that. I know it was hard for some people in the game to deal with eventualities in the narrative and missed opportunities, to be vague. But overall, I think it made for a more impactful story and memorable one. So, it's an example of sometimes you have to let the narrative guide where it's going as opposed to try and shoehorn, a happy ending. Unless your players are all like in a really bad place in the world and you're like, and everything's okay! Because at the same time, you want your players to have a good time. Right. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
That's not happening. Sorry.
There we go.
Hi.
Hey.
I'm asking you for advice for both my daughter and I as player and game master.
Ooh.
When you get two people in your group who all of a sudden they're 40 years old, but they start acting like 13-year-old middle school boys on crack. And it's all fun and games until they almost get you killed, or as in my daughter's case, her character killed on stupid side things. How do you rein that back in? You don't want to be a killjoy and say, okay, no fun, no jokes. But how do you rein it back in so they're focusing on like the group as a whole and
Right.
not dying in a bar fight?
Right. Couple things. One, if it's really hampering the narrative and it's preventing a lot of people to have a good time, talk with them about it outside of the game. Like after a session where it gets particularly bad, you can be like, hey guys, before you leave, or we can take a moment here. I just want to talk. For the sake of us all having a good time at the table, can you try and find a balance between being respectful of everyone else's good time and not trying to derail it, constantly from where other people want to go. For the most part, a lot of times, because it is a very free environment, people want to be like impulsive and I'm going to do what I want. And that's fine to a certain extent, but you do have to be respectful of everyone else at the table. Otherwise, you probably won't be invited back to the table, You're supposed to play the game as a collaborative experience, even though there can be tension and there can be moments where there can be conflict inside and people can be selfish if it's in character. But if it's so much to the point where nobody else is having fun, then that's a problem with the way you're playing the game. Maybe this table isn't where you should be playing. Because there are tables that might work at. There might be a bunch of, power gamers who are down with the idea of just being, crazy and weird. And, I've had those games too, and they're fun. But you have to make sure everyone's on the same page. So talk with them about it. And if they continue to do it, or you want to teach them a lesson, sometimes make those choices lead to a very, very bad, not like TPK scenario, but like if they're getting in serious bar, they're going to get arrested. They're going to get imprisoned. They're going to get interrogated. They're going to get branded as a criminal on their shoulder. Whoever the head of the guard there is going to take a personal liking to make sure that he makes their life miserable. And now they're a watched individual every time they go into. Everyone's seen their face and grimaces, and now it's oh my God, there's consequences to your actions. That's a way to do it too, where you don't have to kill the character, but you can certainly shame them.
I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, shame.
Hey, Matt. Nice
Hey,
to see
buddy.
you again. So, I work at the local children's hospital, and I
Awesome.
want to, at some point in the future, introduce Dungeons and Dragons to the children there.
That's great.
But all I've ever done as a DM is DM for adults.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice for DMing for children and how young they should be before they get into it? And also, is it at all possible to see how Victor the Black Powder Merchant is doing?
Okay, first part. I'm going to relay what I've heard from other people. I've run a few games for kids. Liam has a lot more experience with this. Sam recently did it. Patrick Rothfuss runs it for his son. One, The best thing you can do is keep the math minimal, so you can focus on the narrative. If you're teaching kids math, that's a different thing. But make it so it's more of a storytelling thing. The dice roll, maybe a modifier here and there, but however way you can simplify the rules. And I'm sure there's people online who have more reduced home-ruled versions of D&D for kids. If you research it, I think I've seen a few out there. It's pretty cool. Second, steer away from focusing on the violent combat aspects of it and focus more on the problem solving, like communal problem solving. One thing that Patrick Rothfuss does for really young kids, I find, is not give them a weapon, give them some magical items and some tools, and a challenge so they have to think of creative ways to get out of it. Like he gave his son no weapons, but gave him a rope that ties itself, and then put him in a dungeon area where he had to, all he had was this rope. And so he ended up using it to tie up monsters so he could ask them questions and eventually convince them to help him out. And then throw the rope up to climb areas where it was dangerous, or use it to wrap around things you could swing across, and let them become creative and problem solve without always having to kill things. As adults, we can keep a difference, but if it's not good to teach a bunch of kids that sometimes the best thing to do is just slaughter your opponent. That's maybe not the best thing to teach them. And gauge the group to see if they want high adventure or if they want dark. Liam was surprised when his daughter and all of her female friends wanted to play. And he's like, what do you want to play? They all went, Curse of Strahd! He was like, okay. And so the more he ran it, the more they were craving some good scary horror. And so he felt it out. So you need to kind of feel out the group at first. You can play it soft and see what they're interested in. And then, gear it more towards their style. But simplify it, focus on the story and narrative. Problem solving and challenges, I think, are generally more interesting than always having combat, although combat can be fun depending on how old the group is. And just be conscientious of that. Those are a few ideas. And the opposite side, I don't want to confirm anything because I like to see anybody else's interpretation. My personal mind, and I'm not saying this is canon because I don't want to kill anybody else's idea, I like to imagine in that final battle, one of the loud explosions that you heard in Vasselheim was him lining the entirety of his shop with all of his explosives with the torch in his hand. Like, they'll never take me alive! And watch as a bunch of cultists come in right for him, and in that final moment, as he kind of lures them all in, he just took them all out with him. That's how I like to imagine he went down. So.
Thank you, Matt.
Matt, when will Elder Scrolls Exandria happen, and will Wildmount be DLC for it?
Talk to your local Bethesda. I don't know. That would be crazy. I don't know. That'd be cool. I'd love that. Heck yeah, I'd love that. That's great. I just don't think it's crazy to me that there's even a book that is out there. That's just something I made up. That's crazy to me. So that I can't even. And if I think too hard, I'm just gonna bleed from my nose. And it's aneurysm.
Hi.
Hope so. Hello.
Hi. So my husband and I both DM, but I think the thing that we kind of struggle with most is having memorable characters, and that's something that you are absolutely well known for. What is your advice on coming up with characters that actually people will remember their names, 4 weeks later?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Well, for one thing, depending on how you create your character, whether it be random rolling for statistics or a point-buy system, I recommend, if you have the opportunity, as much as there is the urge to power game, take a low statistic somewhere interesting in your character, whether it be super low strength and they're super weak and have a hard time getting around. Maybe they have a super low, if you want to be real hardcore Dark Souls level, go super low constitution and just be super ill and frail. But one thing about a unique character is a serious flaw, or a number of serious flaws that makes them human. It makes them easy to connect with. That doesn't necessarily have to reflect from their statistics, but in the 5th edition rules, they did a good job of introducing players to bonds and flaws and personality traits. I think is really, really good introduction to that. But play up the character you create. What are their goals? What are their long-term goals? I think is an important thing, so they know at least what they're eventually driving towards. What's their short-term goal? What is something they're trying to accomplish right now? And the use of having this other party, how are they intending to make this group of new friends help them get to that goal? Consider about the things that they really don't like and try and avoid. Is it confrontation with family? Is it a specific type of creature that they had a bad experience with that they're always looking over their shoulder for, like a boogeyman type thing? Is it they have a fear of public speaking? Is it an issue with law enforcement and they just not down with the man, which will always get them in trouble, which is fun too. Find certain things that you can write down and stick to that may get your party in trouble. Because honestly, some of the best experiences are getting your party in trouble. And try and find common ground between the characters. Like I said, conflict is good, and that's why a lot of my campaigns, I like to talk to the players and ask them, if any of you have previous relationships, what are they? As opposed to having the awkward, we all meet at a table and don't know each other and introduce ourselves like an AA meeting, and now we're a fighting adventuring group. I find if you have a little bit of back history that you develop together, you already come in feeling stronger connection with those characters, and that stronger connection between the two of you has the other players wanting to engage more with that because they want, I want that. There's no real trick to it more than just consider the whole spectrum of good things about them, bad things about them, wants, goals, fears, and write them down. And it won't be perfect at first. It's a messy process of figuring out your character. We, to be fair, all of us at the end of the first episode of the new campaign were like, okay, that was better than expected. We were all just waiting for it to fall apart. And even then afterward, I'm getting phone calls from other players like, okay, I think I'm getting an idea now. So it's a process. But yeah, those hopefully might help a little bit. It could be a long topic.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries.
Hi, Matt. Hey. I'm a newer fan, and I'm new to tabletop games.
Welcome.
And I noticed that you recognize this exceptional cosplay.
Yes.
There's several cosplays in the room, and this being the Critical Role panel. If possible, before the end of the panel, could we get everybody to get a photo with you so we have all the cosplays together?
I think that's a glorious plan.
All right.
A glorious plan. All right, so we'll get the cosplayers up at the end of the panel for one group photo at the front of the audience. So awesome.
Hi, Matt.
Hey, buddy.
How you doing? So, as a DM, I've thrown my fair share of challenges at my players, like the time I threw a dragon turtle at you all, and you turned it into a tortoise.
That's adorable.
It still upsets me. So anyways, I love doing that, and I love challenging my players in fun, creative ways like that. But at times, it does feel like it's an arms race at times because they just really like to murder things. So what advice would you have for, a DM that's struggling to challenge the players and have them develop personalities and adventures like your characters that just go on for years and years?
Okay. Well, for one thing, it is an arms race in a weird way because it's you trying to outsmart multiple other people as a dungeon master, and that's supervillain territory. That's you going like.
That's how I feel.
These are my peers that I respect and love, and we're all in a very equal playing field as far as intellect goes.
Let's murder them.
And they're all trying to beat my stuff. So yeah, for one thing, it's fun when you have a group that are all we can do a lot of damage. You're like, oh, that's cool. That doesn't help if you fight a lot of creatures that you can't damage them. You can only defeat them by discovering these 3 relics throughout this area and destroying them at this one pillar. But while that's happening, it's stalking them the entire time. The fear of we cannot touch this thing. Coming up with challenges where the creature can only be damaged if you acquire this, this one NPC and have them within a proximity of it because their backstories are tied. But you have to keep them alive as much as you're also getting ready to damage this thing. Coming up with abilities that the creatures can have that can shut down or convert party members to its side, and nothing's better than sicking your party against itself, by the way.
Yeah.
That is a delightful thing. In fact, it's really frustrating when Grog's berserk ability allows him to ignore charm effects. I'm like, oh man, it'd be so much fun to just watch him tear him apart from the inside. So you have to think outside of the box. And remember, even the creatures in the player's handbook, if you're like, this creature, I've put up against them before, or something similar to it, and they just stomped it. And you look at it like, I stomped it because they have a lot of damage output. This creature they resist a lot of these the abilities that it can put on them or conditions. Nothing's stopping you from customizing it. Nothing's stopping it from changing it, which is great too if you have a group of players that have been playing for a long time and they already know kind of what creatures can do. Nothing's better than having them fight something like, don't worry guys, it's resistant to fire. Or it's vulnerable to fire, and they do fireball, and it's all of a sudden immune. They're like, wait, what? What? Because then suddenly they don't know where they are, they don't know what's going on, and the real fear creeps into their eyes. So don't be afraid to customize monsters. consider encounters that sometimes cannot be won by just sheer damage output. Sometimes rely on conditions as a difficulty factor. You know, if a creature has a radial stun, that's going to mess things up real fast. Especially if it's on like a 5 or 6 regeneration thing. So like every few rounds or so, all of a sudden half the party is just stunned. That sucks for them.
For them. Thank you very much, Matt.
No
I
worries.
appreciate it.
Yes, I'm short. Hi.
I'm sorry about your party, by the way, that I just told them that. Hi.
Hi. Yes. So, love your show. Not really a D&D question, more so about you and your team. You and Travis and everyone did an escape room together.
Oh yeah.
That was awesome, but I wanted to,
so
how did
close.
you get into that? How'd that happen?
Well, we had like we've been a fan of escape rooms anyway. Like me and Marisha, we've done a few of them, and they were doing a show for Alpha at the time called Escape, where they were asking people to do different escape rooms, and they had one that was kind of a Harry Potter sorcery theme, and they're like, "Well, get the Critical Role people," and we're like, "Yeah." And then Chris Sabat, the voice of Vegeta, was in town, and they're like, "We'll get him in." And he's like, "I don't know what I'm doing," and we're like, "Great." And it was a fun escape room. They just invited us to do, and we totally almost got there and lost at the very last second, which is frustrating. But so that was just them asking us to do it from an internal Geek and Sundry standpoint. But they knew that we were fans of escape rooms, and my proposal to Marisha actually was I designed and built an escape room that was Lovecraft themed.
Oh my god, that's cool.
So yeah, we were like me and Taliesin, like a bunch of our friends were sneaking off for days at a time. I had to record. I had sessions back to back this day, so I'll see you this evening. And then we drive down to Huntington Beach to a friend of ours who had a warehouse, and we're just like building flats and getting old furniture and made an escape room for us. Like, yeah, escape rooms are a thing we're fans of. But I think I've built the only one I'll ever build because they're a pain.
Yes, they are. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Matt.
Hello.
I have a question about, I don't want to be too spoilery, but toward the end of the last campaign, talking about missed opportunities, how, that was one of the more visceral, emotional moments that I've seen in almost anything.
I know what you're talking about, yes.
And how, like, what's going through your head, both as the DM and as just Matt, his friend, when you're seeing a player go through that kind of, excuse me, that kind of like an emotional reaction, both as him and as his character?
Yeah. Part of that is checking in with the player. The player involved, we had many discussions outside of the game about the possible paths the character might take. And it was very much where do you see the character wanting to go? What are the decisions he'd make based on certain scenarios? And are you comfortable with pursuing this regardless of how it turns out? You know, making sure that the player was okay with that. Because, once again, you want to make sure they're having a good time, and you don't want to, just for the sake of, well, the dice said, you know, completely destroy somebody who's going through maybe a hard time in their life. So you have to be conscientious of that. Just check in with them, make sure everything's okay, make sure they're okay with going along with whatever happens. And if they say no, then you can be like, okay, well, maybe we'll take a break from this narrative for a little while and come back to it until you're ready. Or if it's a real scenario, you can salvage it and just kind of prolong that decision or whatever dark path it might take and wait for it to resolve down the road, maybe when they're in a better, you know, emotional place in their life. So a part of you is the dungeon master. You have to be true to the narrative, but you also have to be respectful of your players there and make sure that they're still having a good time and you're not putting them in a place that isn't, you know, at the time mentally healthy for them. It's hard. It's a hard balance. But it's one that only comes with experience and just making sure that you still respect, you know, the people that are giving you the time to be part of your story.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
You look great.
Good to know that locking people in a room until they accept a proposal is a good idea.
Works in a lot of scenarios, I find.
So, I've never DM'd anything before, and I'm trying to set up a low magic 5e campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So that completely eliminates a lot of classes. How do I go about fixing any of this?
We can have a low magic campaign and have magical characters. Just consider that they understand that having magical abilities is probably very rare and probably very feared. You know, or like if it's a world where there's almost no magic and somebody suddenly throws a fireball, anybody in the vicinity is gonna be like, chain them up, you know. that's a problem. So consider it could be a very kind of fugitive type game where they're trying to keep their abilities on the DL. They're trying to hide it from society. You could also consider maybe magic in itself is visceral and dangerous. It can have an element where if they roll really low on an attack, or have them like wild magic wise, if whenever they cast a spell, roll, and if it goes really badly, they lose control and it might hurt them. You can think of narrative reasons as to why magic is still a dangerous and sparing thing.
Oh, like the spell plague.
That could work out, yeah. No, we're talking like spell plague, like Warcraft, like plague. No.
Forgotten Realms.
Okay, there we go. Yes, that could work fine. Blood plague is what I was thinking of. Old WoW players know what I'm talking about. I remember watching the Desolation of Ironforge. But yeah, you can tailor classes if you want to. You could tell people if you really want no players to be casters, then you can have them multi-class into them down the road if magic becomes more prevalent, if they'd be interested. Or you can just reduce the overall damage of spells if you're keeping combat more tailored. That gets a little more fiddly with the customization, and if this is your first time DMing, I wouldn't recommend messing with it that much.
Yeah, I already created 2 classes for it.
Okay, so you're already down the path.
I needed a healing class.
Fair enough. But then you consider healing. You consider some abilities may not be spells; they could be variations to it. Like for instance, maybe they're an alchemist. Maybe a fireball is a giant sphere of some concoction they made, and they throw it, and it explodes, and it's the same damage and the same radius, but it's not necessarily magical. Or a healing spell could be somebody who is a fantastic field medic and has a bunch of salves and medicinal herbs that they can just jam into their wounds real fast, and it's a cure wound spell. You can find ways to tailor existing rules, but take away the narrative magic aspect of it to a certain extent, and make it a little unwieldy in the higher levels. Like Ice Storm, turn the AC on very high. But by then maybe there's other ways you can narratively consider the use of magic in the world. But those are some ways you can go with it. I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
So you already addressed my first question earlier in the day. So I guess my question is, early on in the first campaign, you said, make a bear pun and Angel loses its wings. How can you look at yourself in the mirror after Honey Heist?
Look, my wife ran that game. Many of you in the audience will understand I had no choice. She was amazing. It was her first time ever running an RPG. And Honey Heist is a game designed for bear puns. There's a difference between too many bear puns in a game that isn't Honey Heist and being in Honey Heist and where it's practically in the rule set. So I didn't feel too bad about that. We knew what we were getting into with that. But yeah.
Yeah, she did an amazing job. And in all seriousness, I think I can speak for everybody in this room when I say how important you and your players are to our week, every single week. Thank you so much.
Hey.
Hello.
First of all, I want to say I really appreciate you and all of you guys being sensitive about spoilers, because I haven't gotten that far in Critical Role.
So that's why I was being careful.
Yeah. And the second thing is a question, and it is, as a DM, and then I guess also as a player, how do you balance planning with your character sheet and stuff, or DM obviously, versus improv and off-the-cuff stuff? Just think of it when you're there.
That can change either way, often. Part of what's the thrill of the game is preparation. Usually gets thrown out the window as a dungeon master when the players make contact with your plans. People always say, plan never survives contact with the enemy. Same deal when it comes to running a role-playing game. So the balance for me, preparation-wise, is not to prepare too much super detailed. Because more often than not, you'll end up throwing out the hours of work you did for this whole thing that never happened, or the party completely missed. Instead, spend a little bit of time with bullet points and basic notes that can give you the general idea of a direction they can go or a location they could be at. That way, if it doesn't go to, you didn't lose too much time with it, and you can always bring it back later. If they go to it, you have enough written down that you can quickly make up the rest, fill in the gaps. That process allows you to loosely prepare a lot more possibilities and, as such, be more comfortable. As a player, your job is to mess with the dungeon master. So, your character sheet is your preparation, and then you come to the table and you see how you can fiddle and ruin their work.
I guess then all the pile of maps you've had, is it's not strictly necessary.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of maps that just never get seen. But at the same time, I would prefer. Those are all map ideas that I take a picture of, or save in case they come up later in the campaign, or the ideas can be reused, so they don't all go to waste. And I'd prefer to prepare things just in case and have them go away than railroad my players to go, I worked so hard on this map, you're gonna fight here, dang it. So it comes with the territory, I suppose.
Cool.
Thank you.
Mr. Mercer, first, thank you for streaming. I've never been to a con. I've never even played Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, welcome.
So I feel like a fangirl when I bought all this stuff. It's not me. So I was always curious when I got hooked in the first campaign.
Yeah.
It was right around the time when Percy died.
Oh yeah.
I just happened to be on Twitch. I was watching it. Yep. Spoiler. Sorry if it's old. So hopefully nobody's mad. But that night, Marisha seemed distraught and pissed. And I was always curious what happened after the stream was over.
Whenever anything intense happens at the stream, and people always make jokes like, "Oh, Matt's sleeping on the couch tonight," No, it might be all of us afterward going and getting a drink if something really emotionally happens. That happens almost every time something really big happens. We'll all go to Timmy Nolan's, which is this little Irish pub over in Burbank, not too far from us, and we'll all just have a drink and kind of commiserate. But there's never any anger or frustration outside of the moment. A lot of times it's in character, and sometimes it's just frustration with the scenario, but none of us, we all respect each other too much to direct it at each other.
Okay.
We're lucky enough that we have a long-term friendship, and we played long enough where we don't do that. That isn't always the case at game tables. I've been in games where people do allow those emotions to bleed into directing it at a person outside of the game, and that's unfortunate and unhealthy, but those are the things you just talk about afterward. If you notice that happening, go to that player, go to that dungeon master, and be like, hey, what's up, man? Let's talk this out. How can we go forward and not let this bother each other again and understand this isn't me, this is the character, So those conversations can happen. But thankfully we don't have that problem because we've been through enough together and we all kind of appreciate and respect each other and not let that happen.
Okay. She just seemed like, after you guys, she mentioned that, whenever somebody died, you guys were all going to go get a drink together or something.
And we do every time something really, really crazy happens.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again.
No worries. Oh, man, I'm scared for this new campaign. They're all level 2 right now. Oh, man. Oh, boy. That's so funny. They rolled up their characters, and Liam's like, I have 12 hit points. I'm like, Oh, man, we did our session 0, and the first hit Laura's character took, she went to 0 hit points. And I was like, oh, no. Little different now, isn't it?
Basically gods, right?
Yeah, basically gods. It's fine. It's great. I'm sorry. Hi.
Hi. So I've known you of voice actor fame before I got into Critical Role.
Oh, cool.
Last Thursday was actually my first episode that I've ever seen.
Welcome to the chaos.
Thank you. So I was wondering if you have ever been tempted to, or if you've ever actually done it before, slipped, I want to say Easter eggs of past characters that you voiced into Critical Role or not?
I would say I was never trying to slip Easter eggs outside of the game into it because I want to keep it very separate. And the more I bring in pop culture elements of it beyond the side jokes and stuff, the more I think it can break immersion. And I kind of want to keep it, wholly kind of our own realm. But there will be character voices that I've used in projects that'll bleed over into it, partially because I'm having to voice a lot of characters. And there's going to be a lot of voices that are similar and a lot of voices you've already heard. That's, it's a little frustrating. I'll do a character, I'll be like, it's kind of a woodsy kind of, farmer type. And so I'll do like a laid back sort of southern accent like this. And everyone's like, oh, look, it's a dare from Pillars. I'm like, no, all right. But that's going to happen. But generally I try and keep them separate.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Hi. All right, we got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to try and get through questions pretty quickly. We're probably not going to get through everybody, and if I miss you, I'm so sorry, but we're going to try. All right. Question.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, after watching just finishing the entirety of the first season of Critical Role, I just wanted to ask, what's your process for creating, deeper and more memorable characters that kind of stick with the players?
Honestly, I don't think there's. It's hard to force a character to be beloved by the players. Sometimes a lot of NPCs you don't expect for them to latch onto, they do. And so there's no real. Gilmore's a perfect example. I never expected for it, to continue that way. But I'm glad it did because he's an amazing character. So like there's no way to engineer it necessarily, but as long as you flesh out NPCs that have a similar dynamic as, like I said earlier, about making your players more, three-dimensional and having a series of, positive and negative things about them, you will comfortably begin to portray them as a dungeon master in a much more realistic way, and that will breed better empathy with the players. If you involve an NPC in a scenario where they either save the party or tremendously help them out of a jam, they're immediately going to be like, that guy's awesome. We're going to go back to that guy. Or like, that lady saved our butt. We're going to go ahead and pull her into this next storyline, So that's really helpful. Or for villains also. Not every villain is black and white. Consider a lot of enemies or villains don't see themselves as the villain. And some of the better ones are the things that feel like they're doing it for the right that nobody else understands. Or it's for the selfish reasons that for them are good for me but are bad for many other people. Thinking about what makes a three-dimensional villain can make them a very unique and memorable villain. And remember, some of the best villains get away, come back later, especially if they're intelligent. Not everything stays to die. Not everything is like, I'm going to stay till I'm at 0 hit points and blah. So they're like, I'm at half health. This is not going well. Peace. And that's frustrating for the party too, because then you have like the, I'll get you. It's fun. Good question.
Thank you.
No worries.
Matt, how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for being an inspiration to myself and all these amazing people I can now call critters, because they are fantastic people. I'm glad to call every single one of them a brother and a sister because of this awesome community. Thank you. I hope that this continues on for as long as possible.
I hope so too.
I DM, I run multiple games. My Thursday is a game, and then
That's
straight
awesome.
to Critical Role because it's just all the hype. You reinvigorate me after maybe the session didn't do well or whatever, but it's just so great. So I'd rather use up my question just to tell you thank you so much, and can you bless my dice?
That's fair. That's fair. Thank you very much. Ooh, good color scheme. That's a natural 20 on the first roll. Nice! I'm not even...
Oh, no! Take the picture now! Picture!
There you go. I love when the dice work for the narrative.
Glad it wasn't Wheaton.
Dude, I was waiting for it. I was like, this is going to be a 1. I know it.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, buddy.
So, thank you for being a leader for the Tabletop Renaissance, you and everybody in Critical Role. That I was there the very first day you guys streamed, and the minute that you guys finished, I just knew we just changed history forever.
Thank you.
So, and and because of the Renaissance, I've also been now growing my own blog and everything else, and now I'm actually a big part of the D&D Twitter community. So yeah, so I'm actually really everywhere in there now. I also commented about your corruption tables.
I'm glad I finally got to put that out there.
Yeah,
Let me
it was
put it in the
cool.
book. I was sad.
I can't wait for my Dark Arcana supplement to come out. You'll like that. I'll tag you for that one.
Okay, cool.
But I wanted to ask, because every DM has their own, what kind of DM prep rituals do you go through?
I have a very specific playlist I listen to when I'm writing my game. That consists of the symphonic. It's a soundtrack that is a symphonic version of the Chrono Trigger soundtrack.
Okay.
Mixed with symphonic Final Fantasy VI soundtrack. And so those games have played such a huge role in my youth, my formative creative years, that just having those running puts me in the mood to just write. So I'll put that on, put on the music. I've also found that the Minecraft soundtrack, which is now on Spotify, has actually really good writing music too. It's just nice and atmospheric in the background. Other than that, rituals involve making sure that my place is set. I know exactly where everything is behind my DM screen. I have my dice box here with the dice in there. I have my folder here. I have the preparation sheets of the session right here. I have maps to this side. I have, platforms over here. I have my drink here. I have my music set up here. I have an actual specific layout that to me the ritual is placing everything in place before the game. And if I'm running late and I don't have time, I'm going to flip out and nobody can talk to me. Hey, Matt, can I have some? No! Setting it up! I'm scared how I am in those times in hindsight. But yeah, so the setup ritual for me is definitely a ritual now that I think about it.
One last thing. I couldn't make it to the line in time. Can I roll a persuasion check? Persuasion check to just get a quick signature.
Unfortunately, if I do it to one, it opens up to the chaos here, and they have to rush me out here thereafter. Are you going to be here tomorrow?
No, I won't. That's why.
Well,
After?
I'll see what I can do. I'll
Okay,
see what I can do.
thanks.
It's a slippery slope.
I know.
Because a lot of people are also in a similar situation. I want to do as much as I can, but there gets to a certain point too where it's unwieldy. But thank you, buddy.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, buddy.
So, actually, my first question is, how do you guys remember 3 hours of your script every... No, I'm kidding.
Oh, we spend the whole week rehearsing leading up to it. We have like 4 days. We have dress
Clearly.
rehearsal on Wednesday. It's great.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, so I actually started DMing because of you guys. And completely custom world, everything.
Nice.
One of the things I struggle with, and I've watched GM tips and everything, how do you keep track? Because I'm trying to keep the game flowing, trying to keep the narrative going, trying to get my players involved. And I struggle, like they'll ask, oh, what's this guard's name? Oh, his name's Jin. Okay, great. How do you keep track of that? Or because if I stop to write the notes, I feel like I'm slowing the narrative down sometimes. How do you keep track of that stuff during the game?
When the players are talking, especially to each other, that's where you write down notes. So when we come up like, oh yeah, the guy's name is Jin. All right, cool. You meet Jin, you talk about Jin, and as soon as they're like, all right, where do we go next? You're like, Jin. Yeah, so don't have to necessarily write it in the moment. If you feel like you need to stay engaged, continue to do so. In the moment they start talking to each other, listen, write a note. You'll see me do it a lot in the session. I'll be like, oh, they're talking? Cool. Oh, yes. So, yeah. It's finding the balance of the downtime when they're all focused on you. That's when you can go ahead and write your notes.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
No worries.
All right. I know we're running out of time. One of a voice actor that I think would be really good to be on Critical Role and that Mary knows, Steve Bloom.
Oh.
Why can't we get him on Critical Role?
Look, you think we haven't tried? It's interesting, and this has been a unique experience since we started the show. Is a lot of people are not comfortable streaming their D&D game. We've asked a lot of people. I mean, one of the frustrating things I had, because we've tried to invite a lot of people on from different, diverse backgrounds and ethnicities. Because we're a bunch of white kids who play D&D, and like it feels it's
nerdy ass voice actors.
Yeah,
we get it. We
hear it all every week. It's shitty that in order to bring more diversity into our show, I'd have to fire friends from our group, and it's like I don't want to do that. So our guests is an opportunity where we can bring more people in, but a lot of people I've reached out to about it are like, nah, I'm good. It's a little nerdy for me, or I
hope we're not that intimidating
on the internet.
to them.
Well, no, but for some people it is, and I've noticed that. Steve very much so. He's like, I don't want to do this online. But the more that it's gone, and the more that people have been more welcoming, and the community has been more positive, it's starting to turn around. Deborah Ann Wall, who you know from Daredevil and stuff, we asked her to be a guest like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and she said no. She said, this is a personal thing for me, and doing the internet in front of a lot of people to flame me for this, I don't want to do it, and I completely understand and respect that. But since then, she's kind of been like, okay, this is actually really fun. We've hung out a bit, and she's really, really cool, so I may try and bring her in for a guest in the next season, this season. So we'll see. It's starting to change, but it's been a challenge to get people to come in, because when you're on the internet, you're exposing a lot of yourself in a space that's improvised and very open and very sensitive, and the internet isn't always kind, so we're trying.
Thank you.
No worries, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. I'm so sorry. For those who didn't make it, I'm so sorry. I apologize, but I love you all. Oh, look at this amazing man!
Jeffrey, you son of a bitch. I love you, man.
That's awesome.
I met you earlier today for the autograph session, and I said it earlier, but I want to say it again. But I didn't start with Critical Role or you. A friend actually recommended me towards Matt Colville.
Yes!
And I saw his Running the Game series, and that it made me see DMing as less difficult, scary, or just so much hard work, and that's what inspired me to actually start pursuing Dungeons and Dragons again.
That's awesome.
To start running the game, and then I found you, and that inspired the way that I want to DM, much less murder hobo or stuff like that, just storytelling. And one thing I've ran into that I find difficult and I want to ask was, with all the voices that you do and the characters you make, how would one get into voice acting to make those voices? and to make these characters feel so much more unique in their own with the voices that you do.
How to basically develop voices for the game, you mean?
Yes.
Practice. Whenever I'm in the shower, whenever I'm driving in my car, whenever I'm by myself, for the most part, occasionally when Marisha's around, I'll be just improvising and doing impressions or trying to come up with weird voices and dialects. I talk to myself a lot. And that's a good place to kind of figure things out. And if you come up with an interesting voice that you've never done before, you can pull out your phone and record yourself, and then you can listen to it later to replicate it. And the more you practice these different voices, the more comfortable you are at just pulling them out at the drop of a hat. Also, when you write down NPCs or you're creating characters for your campaign, taking notes of what kind of voice it is a really good reference point whenever you have to go back to that character. You can write like low, gravelly, or a high-pitched and reedy, or kind of a Cockney accent, or a really terrible Russian accent. Things that you can, when you look at the glance of the NPC sheet, you already have a ballpark idea of where they were before, and you can jump into it. But it comes with experience. It comes with listening and repeating. And trying to copy other voices out there. Because even if you don't become a good impressionist, the process of trying it, you'll find your own unique voices and different things you didn't think you could do beforehand. And just recording yourself, listening to it, practicing, and don't be afraid to try them out in the middle of a campaign. Because even if your friends give you shit for it, they're your friends. It'll be fine.
I just want to say one last...
Thank you, man.
I just want to say that you're an inspiration to us all. Thank you for doing this.
You guys are inspiration to me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, let's give it up to Matt Mercer. That's our time for today.
Thank you.
At this time, I want to ask...
Hey guys, we hope you liked that video, and we hope to see you at the next Florida SuperCon, which, by the way, is July 12th through the 15th at the Greater Fort Lauderdale Convention Center. You can get tickets by clicking right here. It's that easy. Click here to see some more great videos, and click here to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.